On the phone, it's a pleasure to welcome to the program Zeynep Tufekci. She is a assistant professor at the UNC, a Princeton CITP fellow, and a Harvard Berkman faculty associate in sociology. Welcome to the program, Zeynep.
Thank you for inviting me.
Just for those people who aren't familiar with this Facebook study, tell us, give us the details first of the study.
Well, the study is actually a pretty basic study. What they did was they divided about 700, almost 700 Facebook users into two random groups, and they tweaked the newsfeed of one group so that they got slightly more positive posts show up, and they tweaked the newsfeed of the other group so they got slightly more negative, sort of posts containing more negative words to show up. And then they measured whether seeing slightly more positive words and slightly more negative words in your own newsfeed influenced what kind of things you wrote on your own newsfeed. And they found that indeed, if you saw slightly more positive stuff from your friends and family and whoever your Facebook friends are, you did respond with slightly more positive words yourself, and same for negative words as well.
And so how do they, I mean, when you say they tweaked it so that more positive posts would, how do they go about doing that? They just simply filter out certain posts?
Well, okay, so you have to, yes, they filtered out certain posts so they hid them. You have to understand that Facebook's newsfeed is curated algorithmically and otherwise, right? That's an opaque process. We don't know. It's called EdgeRank, and we don't really know how it works because Facebook won't tell us. When you go on Facebook, what you're not seeing is not a random selection of users, friends you have and their posts. What you're seeing is an algorithm that has been, in fact, just kind of the one that got published is probably the tip of the iceberg, because keeping you coming back to the newsfeed is Facebook's main business model, because you're the product that they're going to sell to advertisers, your eyeballs, so they got to keep you coming back. So what they do is they look at what people respond to and what people come back for, and they show you more of that, and they show you less of the stuff that they think will make you not come back to the site. So, it's sometimes people think they show you happy stuff, but that's not really true. What it appears to happen is that they show you stuff that keeps you engaged. So if you're wondering why your Facebook feed is all drama all the time, well, that's part of the issue, is that you're seeing something that's curated algorithmically to you to keep you coming back so that you can be sold to the advertisers.
Interesting. All right, so let's talk about, the implications of this. People are obviously upset because they were not aware that this was going on, which, some people argue...
Yes, that's one part of the question. If you do research generally, academic research, you should tell people what you're doing, and you tell people, you give them means to opt in and opt out. What Facebook has been saying is that, look, our terms of service allow us to do that, and that's not completely false, right? Their terms of service do allow them to do this kind of research, and in fact, if they never ever published again, so we never got to see sort of the academic considerations of the ethics of this kind of research, they're doing this kind of research all the time. You're just we got into this controversy because we got to see one study that people found a little disturbing. And to be honest, the study is kind of run-of-the-mill. It's not really that big a deal. In fact, it's not the first study that Facebook published. The one that got me alarmed was the one that showed that that was the voting study, which showed that Facebook can boost voter turnout. Now, it sounds like a great thing. Oh, Facebook can boost voter turnout, more people will vote. And that's not a bad thing, of course, but it means that since Facebook knows a lot about you without even you telling them, the Facebook's algorithms could potentially, and I'm not making the claim they have or they intend to, but their own publications are telling us they could throw a close election, especially in a first-past-the-post country like the U.S., by boosting the voter turnout of the kind of people who are supporters of whoever they want to win, and depressing the turnout of the other kind, both of which seem quite plausible from published studies that Facebook data scientists have published themselves. That's an earlier study. It was published about a year ago, and that actually got me a little more alarmed. I mean, they know a lot about you. They can figure out if you're gay. They can figure out if you're Republican. They can figure out who your close friends are. Complete information asymmetry. And they can impact what you think is happening in your social network, because you get to see what they're showing you in the order they're showing you. And since Facebook is so important to everyday lives of so many people around the world, not just the U.S. So that's sort of been the general concern. And of course, you can have a lot of concern about this specific study. They obviously didn't do a great job with consent, because the fact that so many people are upset, it's just at face value says there's an issue here, and they could have done a better job. But even if they do a better job with the next study, they do an opt-in one, and that wouldn't solve the problem. This is the tip of the iceberg of the kind of research they do every day, and the kind of power they have, and the kind of influence they have. And I think that's the bigger conversation.
Right. I mean, it seems to me it is sort of just a broader awareness of the power of these social networks, and that this power is obviously concentrated in some very specific hands.
Right, and it's not just Facebook, right? The big sort of Google's rankings are very powerful. Think of it, if you're a politician and your first page is incredible, and we have research that shows that what people don't click on the second page, and what they see at first impression is very important. And whatever the algorithm selects or the Google selects, we don't know. These are all black boxes to us. Could greatly influence what people think of a politician. And once again, in a first-past-the-post system where 1% here, 2% here makes all the difference, this is real power. And I'm not saying this to say any of these companies at the moment are doing anything sort of illegal or untoward. That's not the point. In fact, it doesn't even matter. What Sheryl Sandberg was asked about, and she said, "Oh no, we don't intend to control any elections." Well, to me, the fact that that's a question and we have to take her word on it is a bigger problem. And again, I have friends in the Facebook data science team. It's not some conspiracy of people who are trying to do evil things. Not at all. A lot of them are former academics. They're concerned about this stuff. It's not that I distrust them. It's just that there is this power in a few companies that are corporations, and these corporations have interests. And what if you say you want to run against something they don't like, and then what happens?
Right. I mean, and let me ask you about this. And I'm a little hesitant to even bring it up because I haven't really tracked this down, but it was just sent to me. And so if you're aware of these folks, maybe you'd have more insight. But in the credits of the study, there's a Jeffrey Hancock from Cornell University who is involved in something called the Minerva Initiative, I guess. And apparently one of the funders of a study at Cornell modeling discourse and social dynamics in authoritarian regimes comes from the Department of Defense. And
right. So look, this is the kind of study that a lot of academics want to do, and unfortunately there has been a great deal of cuts in funding from the National Science Foundation and other sources. So a lot of academics have been turning to whatever funding sources they can have to do this research. And remember, this research is public research, right? There's not some secret thing. In fact, I'd be much happier in a world where, the Jeff Hancock you mentioned, gets given the data and gets to publish it and we all get to see it, right? That actually is not a bad outcome. The problem is the most valuable data is now held by a few corporations, and the science funding to study human behavior online that would come from more neutral sources like the National Science Foundation has been cut and cut and cut. So if you want to do these studies, a lot of people do turn to, there's a lot of Department of Defense funding. There's a lot of corporate interests, who Coca-Cola funds this kind of research because they want to sell you stuff. So I think it's in the public interest to realize that, one, this is going on. Two, everybody's interested in this, right? It's corporations, it's governments, it's our Department of Defense, it's everybody else's Department of Defense, right? So it's not like, everybody's interested in these new rich data sources, and it's all there. Everybody's interested in these sort of dynamics. And what's happening is, at the same time, academic research, sort of the neutral research, is being gutted, and you're losing control of, how do you do this research? The data is held by the corporations, the money is held by, non-scientific, non-neutral sources. And I think those are the big picture questions. I don't really want to feel like, we can all get upset about one study or, sort of,
right. I mean, I
target one academic, but really that's just not the problem. In fact, a lot of the people involved in this study, a lot of the sort of people you cite, they're perfectly fine academics. There's no reason to doubt their integrity. They're not the problem. The problem is the setup we have in which valuable data held by a few corporations that everybody is interested in, and we haven't really had a public discussion of, wait, what's the power here?
Right.
How do we think about this power, and how do we research this power so that the people researching it can speak up, that they're independent and can say, look, this is what we found. Since the study got published, the lead author had this little post on Facebook itself. It was just a couple of paragraphs, and they've just all gone silent. They're not talking, and that's really not in the spirit of public discussion. If they were, I want to hear their point of view. I want them to explain stuff. I want them to talk about what else is going on. That's what the public dialogue should be. But because it's a corporate setting, I don't know. I mean, I don't think they're allowed to talk, which points to
one of the problems. And I should say, yeah, I'm raising this about the Defense Department only because I think, it helps to illustrate the power of these type of social media.
Right, and look, it's not. We know. It makes perfect sense.
The Defense Department, engaged in this sort of quasi-Twitter in Cuba. There's obviously a control agenda that either a corporation or a government would have, and this clearly illustrates
there is.
the
and
power
the thing is
of these things.
Yes, these things are powerful, and I'm not really surprised. If I were a Department of Defense, I'd be interested in this too, right? I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. And the point is, it's also a point of interest to every government around the world. It's not just ours.
Oh, right, of course.
So it's even more important that the people, who want, we should have these discussions as public. We should have these, research public and published, because it's very true. These things are powerful. I have myself authored a study that shows that Facebook was influential in the initial Egyptian uprising 2 years ago. Interviews with activists show that the people who were on social media were the ones that turned up early, which were important to starting the cascade. So these platforms are powerful. They have major impacts in the world. And it would be a pity if we didn't have these conversations and all the funding came from, non-neutral sources and governments and corporations, so that, the research was directed at either selling you more Coca-Cola or, whatever government is researching, whatever their agenda is, rather than understanding, oh, wait, there's these platforms, we use them, they're crucial to politics. Maybe think about what alternatives we could build, maybe think about how to understand their power. Oh, there's a lot of great questions that need to be answered, and I'm kind of glad that the study sparked this brouhaha. I don't think the study itself is worth.
Yes, no,
if it was
I
just
agree.
that, if it was just that, I would just say, okay, fine. It's a little bit of an academic brouhaha, but it's not. This is the stuff of life. This is the stuff of politics for the 21st century.
And I want to sort of, explore these questions a little bit, and I think, And we should know that I think that, on some level, because of your involvement, obviously, in studying this stuff, there are assumptions you have about the power of this that I'm not sure that everyone does. And that's why I bring these these issue up, because it is one thing that I think people understand that, and people are familiar with the dynamic that Facebook played a role in the context of the Egyptian Arab Spring. But that is, a distinction between people using this as a tool to connect to other people and to bring people out versus the forces that control these tools in manipulating them in such a way that they get certain outcomes. And so with that, distinction made, and with, hopefully the sort of the broader understanding of the ability that this study, and I imagine other studies that they've done in the past, show, what is it from just a citizen's perspective? What is it that we can do? Is there anything that we can do to minimize this, or is this something that we need to just simply be conscious of? Or?
Yeah, well, I don't really have an answer in my back pocket to what to do next, but clearly the public discussion is important, and there are other industries that have conflicts of interest, like pharmaceuticals, right? We're kind of interested in their research, and because they have all this power too, and we take those drugs. This is not that unsimilar. This is something that has real power in the 21st century. And there's questions of electoral power, there's questions of in this case, like, it was emotional well-being, even though the effects were minimal. What if the effects were huge? And what if they didn't know the effects would be minimal when they started the study? What if, a lot of people got depressed as a result? There's real questions here. And, this needs to happen as a public conversation. I think politicians should be talking about this. I think constituents should be talking about it. We should be looking at our online practices. I think it would be bad if the story just died down as, sort of a Facebook outrage and roll your eyes. This is nothing to roll our eyes at. This is real power. And it's wrong also to focus on just Facebook. It's not just Facebook.
Right.
And again, it's not just this little study, which by itself, I would object to the consent procedures as an academic. I would say this is not how you do it, but that would be kind of a minor concern in the overall scheme of things. If that were all there, we would just say do better next time, and, sort of different, but that wouldn't solve the problem. So all I can say is, don't treat these black boxes as things that can't be changed. There's people who are programming these things, and these corporations, they're corporations. They're not owners of the Ten Commandments. They can be regulated. They can be opposed. They can change. They can change internally. They can change externally. They can be made to change. This is the stuff of 21st century.
Right.
We had these things, right? We don't let people put lead in our water. We have regulations for that. We have other mechanisms for that. And that's we should just start thinking about how do we deal with real power, the emergent new power of 21st century.
Yeah, it seems to me that it's a fairly decent place to start to say you cannot do these type of... I guess it gets very tricky, right? Because the issue isn't so much that this academic study, in my mind, that is almost the best case scenario, frankly.
Sure. I don't mind. Yeah, at least when academics do these things, I'm not beholden to any corporation. That's
right.
why I can do what I'm just doing, which is I'm just out there talking about things.
Can we regulate? Can we say to a Facebook, just for instance, hey, if you do any of this type of study, and where would the line be if we were to say it must be opt-in? Because obviously their whole business model is based on a study like this of some sort at this point, right? Where they're...
Right. A lot of studies like this. I don't have an answer in my back pocket, but there's a lot of sort of similar models. As I said, the pharmaceutical industry is a model. There's been great op-eds published in all sorts of outlets. There's a lot of awareness. So we can start discussing, maybe hold panels, maybe, this can become a political issue. I wouldn't presume to say, here's a complicated problem, here's my simple answer, because
right.
There's no simple answer. But, keeping it on the agenda and not looking at this, the worst sort of response is, And I hear this from a lot of people who roll their eyes and say, well, then get off Facebook, and are all smug about it. But the point is, if you're in the Middle East and you want to do any politics, you've got to be on Facebook. The point is, if you're a college student and you want to volunteer, you want to do anything, you got to be on Facebook. If you're an immigrant and your family's on Facebook, you got to be on your Facebook. So next time somebody just rolls their eyes and say, well, you're an idiot for being on Facebook, that's the worst response, because that kind of puts the whole blame on people who depend on a service that really doesn't have an alternative. I don't have an alternative to Facebook if I want to keep up with people around the world and with parts of my family. I just do not. And if you're in politics in the Middle East, you do not have an alternative. For a lot of age groups, there is no alternative. So what we should not do is just say, oh, you're being an idiot for being on Facebook, and kind of be smug about it. Rather than that, realize this is an important service with that. And,
right, and we would never say, oh, well, why do we need a regulation that third party can't tap your telephone if you don't want to be on?
Right.
If you don't want that, then just don't be on your phone.
Yeah, this is the sort of infrastructure of 21st century, so this is important.
And it's interesting because we interviewed the other day Philip Murawski, who cites a couple of studies by Alana Gershon on on Facebook in particular about its sort of it imposes sort of a neoliberal a worldview on people insofar as it is up to them to develop their profiles in such a way that may be sort of distinct from who they are as a human being, and it sort of leads them into creating something that is more attractive to people, that they must essentially market themselves. And the idea that it is up to the individual as to whether or not to engage on Facebook, and then you have to buy into everything that they could possibly do with your information or with your emotions, is all on the individual. It seems to me to be an extension of that idea. And obviously, this is what we have governments for, is to impose some types of regulations in these instances. I mean, we did it, I think, to a certain extent with subliminal messages in TV ads, and so it seems to me that we could do something similar here.
It's possible, yes. This is a great public discussion to have.
Zeynep Tufekci, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for inviting me.